Kent, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me.
Jack, I'm very well. Pleasure to chat to you.
Yeah. I just were very grateful for you making the time. Obviously, I think I've kind of been following your career and curatorial things, and I've gone to a few of your art talks, pretty much from when I left uni till now and stuff. Love that you have. I mean, you've kind of covered almost every aspect of the creative fields, from curation to art making to commercial to institutional. So I feel like you've got a really very well-rounded, informed opinion of the the making of the sausage when it comes to the art world.
Hmm.
Also, I went to one talk that you did years ago at Linden New Art, and I was really impressed and found it very inspiring how you were basically talking about how um, I mean, you've kind of almost made a career out of facilitating and making opportunities for artists. I mean, that was a lot of that's what not what you were talking about, but that's what I took away from the talk, and coming into it largely of not what can I get out of this, but how can I build people up, prop people up and give them opportunities, which I found was really great. So yeah, I was wondering whether you could maybe just give a little bit of an outline of your entry point into the art world, your focuses, and yeah, maybe your career, broadly speaking.
Okay, that's yeah, it's very lovely to hear that you remembered that talk and it had an impact on you. Yeah, that's definitely the sort of underlying philosophy of my work. Like I feel like a rising tide lifts all boats. There's a
Mm.
collective enterprise to creative activity. I often tell, so I'm a teacher now, and I've taught a bit as well at tertiary level. So I've taught as sort of part of my practice in a way. But I always sort of tell my students that an artwork doesn't really exist until there's an audience to connect with it, no matter what that artwork is. You could make something fantastic and leave it in your shed, no one sees it. Technically, to me, that's not an artwork. It needs another person to engage with it. So then the broader kind of amplification of that is this interrelationship between people and objects and people and people and objects and objects. So realizing that it's kind of a network of relationships. So my interest then is trying to figure out how to coordinate the best information flow in that network, that system, how to prop up the nodes that are of strength that are drawing relationships to it. So I tend to think in that kind of holistic way of working. And it comes about, I think, I went to art school when I was 30. So I had a sort of different career. I studied commerce after I left school and worked in corporate for a little bit. Studied economics. I really liked economics, again, for that same notion of kind of how a system coordinates its activity together and how it can be, how collective enterprise and collective activity can generate resources, productivity, energy, progress society. So I studied economics and I worked in corporate, and then I realized that really just wasn't for me, mostly because I felt like I was working at even though I was interested in that collective system activity, I was working inside structures that were profit driven and all the resources were being gathered and drawn upwards, and the disparity in the power structure of those systems um, means that it's very biased. And so anyway, I felt very uncomfortable with that after a certain period of time, and I'm very creative, and I felt like I wasn't having that aspect of my personality explored. So at 30, I had a mini midlife crisis kind of early and went off to art school, kind of started from scratch. Like I'd never done art at school at all. I'd studied economics, legal studies, accounting. And so I'd never done an art class, and I'd never really been to an art gallery that much other than out of my own curiosity. It seemed like a world very separate to mine. I played music in a band. In the 90s, I was in a funk metal band. I played bass. We played, I don't know, 30 or 40 gigs around town. And so I've always had a creative side, but I wasn't exploring it in that work in my 20s. So 30, I was like, let's can that. It's early enough to restart. And I went off to art school. Again, I remember at the time there was 6 weeks before the applications to university were due, and I just gathered all my drawings that I'd had for the band, like CD covers, stage kind of paintings, gathered them all up in all my drawings and painted, I think, 14 paintings in about 2 weeks, gathered them all together, photographed them and sent them off to universities, just hoping I'd get in. And at Monash, they were great. I had interviews with most of the universities, and Monash was terrific. We had a really good interview there, and they let me in. And so then I started basically from scratch. How do I paint? How do I put creative things in the world? How do I engage with creative people? So one of my thoughts going in was, I was 30, I'd never done art. I'm not going to be like a genius painter. I'm not photorealistic. I didn't even realize actually that art had a whole lot of other aspects to it, about ideas and
Right.
you could work with concepts, and that completely blew my mind in about second year of uni. But I'd really just gone there with the intention of painting beautiful pictures. I wanted to put beautiful things in the world and work with other people that were putting beautiful things in the world and not working for profit or trying to buy a pen for 5 cents and sell it for $1.50 and have all that money go to shareholders and not the people who actually made the pen or convince someone to buy the pen. So anyway, so I went to art school, loved it, met a lot of other creative people, learned about the idea of that you could use ideas as a material. And I kind of had that thought that what I might end up doing is meet a whole bunch of artists, figure out ways to participate in kind of a collective endeavor that would grow all of our capacities. And if, I felt like that was more likely going to be an outcome of my work than to be an individual artist myself. And as it turns out, that's kind of how it went, because I was kind of, and being a mature age student too, I'd gather students together and go, let's put a show on. I can see you're making work about repetition and you're making work about repetition. We put it in a space that work can talk to each other. We can show it off. Can't wait around for someone to come and tap us on the shoulder and go, would you like a show in my commercial gallery? Can't wait around for that. You got to make those things happen yourself. And being a bit older and understanding economics and marketing and management and business, like, well, we should just do that ourselves and not rely on other people to do it. So that sort of kicked off that whole process. And my artwork as well was very much about working with other people. So for my PhD, I collected a lot of house plants that people had owned or had, and they lent to me, and I created a garden and I recorded their voices singing. So this garden of pot plants and voices. It was always about collecting people together to make something interesting. And then the natural inclination then, when I was looking for work out of university with a huge student debt, I was like, well, curating is a way to get paid to do this stuff. So then I moved into curating that way.
Was there ever a period after your initial degree where trying to follow the art practice as a viable career option, where that was like all eggs in one basket, where you're like, cool, I'm going to make it as an artist? Or was it always a kind of a thing that you decided to keep doing while you were following things like curating and facilitating other opportunities for in a collaborative sense and things like that?
That's a good question. I had intended, and still do slightly in the background, intend to be an artist in my own right.
It's a
And actually,
beautiful
a lot
piece,
of the
by the way,
work.
behind you. Beautiful
Thank you.
piece.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's one of my paintings.
Love it.
And you can see the kind of system kind of network vibe coming through, I think, in the
Yeah.
abstraction of that. I'd always intended to be an individual artist. The work that I made was not ever really going to be very commercially viable. Not that that necessarily limits your possibility of making a career out of art, but it was sort of very tight. It was installation based, a lot of living plants, which became very stressful to worry about the care of them. And I did have I had a commercial show at Anapapis Gallery, from which I got a really great commission to make a large sculptural piece for a foyer in Collins Street. So I had gone down that path. I was in the Linden Art Prize, which you mentioned, you heard me, maybe that's where I spoke. So yeah, I had intended to, and I tend to do multiple things at once as well. So I find that I get bored if I just have one particular thing that I'm doing all the time. So driving that art practice was very important to me. And I had hoped to make a career out of that, supported by what other work I might need to do to support it, given the installation nature of it. It might have been grants, it might have been getting commissions to work in public institutions for that kind of work, but I could see a pathway for it. But yeah, student debt and my first baby, who came along just after I finished my PhD, sort of geared me into like, all right, I need to sort of recover some financial resources to get myself on my feet. But then I really realized that the curating aspects, I got into curating, like professional curating. My first gig was at Town Hall Gallery in Hawthorne, just relaunched after it had renovated and rejuvenated. So good to work in a gallery that was climate controlled, fully resourced. I put the first screw in the wall of that gallery. I've painted it like probably 20 times myself, which is something we could have hired someone to paint, but I painted it the first few times because I wanted to get a sense of the feeling of the space. I felt like if I painted all the walls, I would get a biological relationship to that architecture, and that would help me in my curating. So I fell in love with curating for those kind of reasons, and working with other people so I could see and handle paintings or sculptures or listen to sounds that people were producing with an intimate engagement. My sort of people that I was fanboying, I could ask them to be in a show, get their work, like look at it, see how it's made, have some influence over how it might be read, or encourage people to see it in a different light, especially people who are not from an art background. Like my beginning, I feel like it's what art is so brilliant, and we were so not exposed to it as much as I feel like we probably could be. Like I wasn't as a child, and I feel like I missed a little bit. And it's sort of part of my mission to introduce art to people who are not necessarily familiar with art, and often complicated art, or art that seems complicated or inhibiting in some way. Either it's, for the most part, there's a lot of people think that artwork is a code that they need to crack. And at one level, that's true. But at another level, it's just an experiential engagement with other humans, with their creativity, with objects and ideas. So it was always a sort of passion of mine to introduce art and try and break down the stigma around the elitism of it or the codification of it. And so, yeah, I fell in love with that aspect and sharing that with other people. And I remember telling people when I was at Town Hall, I'd go in and sit in the gallery sometimes. And because it was a council building, and at the front, there's a desk, a customer service desk. People would come in with council-oriented questions or things, filling out paperwork for a new fence, paying registration for their pet. And while they were there, they see a gallery and they'd wander on in. I love that so much because there's so many people that would come in who hadn't thought of coming into a gallery, maybe never even been into one before. And the thing I loved the most was they'd walk around and I'd hear the sound of people going, oh, I love that sound. Oh, someone's been switched on to a feeling or a thought. So I loved it, and that sort of invigorated me for like, okay, I'd like to do this more. I'd like to share more work with other people, for the artists to promote how important their work can be for people's lives for free. An artist spent months painting an oil painting, put it on the wall, and some random person walks in and gets something from it. And it's really, artists are so generous. Often they'll put those things on the wall hoping they'll sell, but the first desire is to connect to another human being. So to be around that was very inspiring for me, and that kind of led me to focus on curatorial practice. And I felt also like there was a bit more, and there still is, a bit more space to be original or push platforms and boundaries in the curatorial field, because it's, I suppose, relatively new as a vocation in the broader sort of context of art history. I felt like there was more room to do things, push things, than there was in art. I felt like it'd be very difficult for me to be an artist. I was also sort of carrying this concern that I came to art late and missed out on lots of developmental skill set and practice. But so, yeah, I always sort of felt like the best thing for me would be to help other artists in that process. And I loved it. And it felt like, yeah, there was possibility to do things that weren't being done. The curating is kind of dominated by an industry structure in ways that art falls into or, isn't part of. As an artist, you can be a bit more free. As a curator, you've got a stronger industrial system to work within. And that also interests me too. Like, that system is not as efficient as it can be, nor is it as serving of art as it should be. It serves other purposes. And I'm like, well, this should be serving art. So I felt like getting into the curatorial sphere was a way I could kind of try and have some influence about how that might be, you know, behaving and acting.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine, you know, working in the curatorial sphere, like there is actually a lot of opportunity to work with many different concepts and ideas. And you know, I often feel with my art practice, like I'm very happy with the kind of art I make. However, it does only and this is just my personal you know, path and practice and stuff. But yeah, it only really encapsulates one element of ideas that I play with, and that's a total restriction that I've put on myself, and that's okay. But yeah, again, like you were saying, where ideas can actually be a medium, I guess, curating different shows, playing with other artists that actually excel very well at maybe more difficult concepts that you might not, or anyone might not know how to translate those concepts poetically or visually in a visually interesting way. Curation is a wonderful way to, yeah, broadly experience multiple art in a great way and make it accessible to the public.
Yeah, that's totally true. So yeah, on one level, very selfish. I got to handle all the different types of artwork that I'm interested, but I don't make myself. And that's very exciting. And then, yeah, then also that being able to share that with other people. So that was helpful too. Like I also a writer. So I used to write a lot, I set up a couple of websites and used to write a lot of reviews for artists. So one of the things I did realize when I was at art school, partly from being older, partly just from my personality type, that artists communicate through their artwork. They don't necessarily, nor should they be expected to, then, you know, write an essay about that artwork. But I can do that, and I love doing that. So I could look at something, and then, you know, the classic example is like, you know, my mum knows nothing about art, never really interested in it. It's very confused by the whole thing. And I feel like, well, mum, I'll tell you what this is, you know, I'll tell you what this is the artist trying to do, or what I see when I look at it and what it does to me. And then hope that she goes, oh, okay, I get it, and get that sound like, oh. So yeah, sharing it with other people, yeah, the selfishness of being able to engage with it myself, and then that joy of then taking that buzz that I get and then, you know, sharing it with other people, go, how cool, check it out, look what it can do for you.
Right, right. I'm sure you have so many multiple interests when it comes to art in terms of ideas as a medium, like you were saying. But with the kind of art making that you've mainly been interested in, and maybe even that's led into your PhD studying art, what are some of the ideas that you have enjoyed playing with the most and actually translating into art?
Yeah, well, I really enjoy like trying to express the idea of relationships between things. So this idea that everything is connected. And I sort of stumbled on this idea. It's as much a thought experiment than a interpretation of reality. But this idea that there's two things and there's a relationship between those two things. And the general kind of perception for us is there's things, and then there's the relationships between them. For me, I started thinking about, well, what if there's only relationships and they're looking for things, and the things pop up? So the relationships exist, but then the things pop up to join. And that got me really thinking sort of a different way of, you know, what is the material that I'm working with? It's not the objects in the room, it's the relationships between the objects. So that started me thinking about that kind of relationship between things, networks, and, you know, why do some objects then draw more things to it? So they're the sort of underlying aspects that drive my creative thinking, I suppose. And one of the things that I locked onto early was around the relationship to plants. So I moved a couple of times when I was younger, and I went overseas at one point in my 20s. And I'd always noticed every time I moved, the different flora that was in the area, the different street trees, the different smells of the flowers. And that's sort of tied to my sense of identity. Like I remember growing up in Salisbury in Adelaide as a kid, and the gum trees that I used to climb. And I know them so clearly, the smell, the touch, the shapes of the leaves. It's embedded into me. And that's like my identity is the gum trees of that era. Then I moved to Tusmore, which was a posh suburb in Adelaide, and they had these huge pine trees in the park, and I used to climb to the top, pull the leaves apart. So my identity was very much tied to plants. And yeah, when I went overseas, I lived in Liverpool for a little while, just north of Liverpool, Southport. And it was dark and cold and miserable. And I didn't see the sun because I was working as an insurance clerk, Liverpool.
Hmm.
I'd catch a train in the dark, go to work, come back in the dark. And then one time I had a miserable time. And one
Hmm.
time went past a florist and it had gum leaves on it. And the mood that lifted in me, it was the sight and the smell completely like changed. Like it was a soul wash.
Mm.
And that stuck with me a lot. So when I was thinking about relationships between things, I was thinking about my relationship to plants and how that sets my identity. And I thought plants were really interesting material to work with because they are like a factory of connections. Like they absorb light and they process carbon dioxide and they let oxygen out. They are a very good metaphor for the relationships between things and as a relationship to art. So when we go into a gallery space and look at a painting on the wall, suddenly this biological primate with some clothes on has loped into a gallery space and looked at random colors put together on a canvas. And that there's an activation, that thing is somehow you're absorbing something from it, which is affecting you. Your attendance at the gallery is affecting that artwork. So the amount of people that come to visit, the sort of influence of the impact on those people. So there's a relationship happening. And I thought plants is a wonderful sort of metaphor for that. So if I had plants in a gallery space, not only does the relationship a site relationship, it's also a nervous system, biological relationship. We're breathing, we're exchanging gases. It also meant the gallery staff would have to sort of be involved in the collective enterprise of looking after the artwork in a more direct way where it could die. Like most curators put it on the wall and light it, job done. These curators who had to handle these shows with installations had to care for the plants as well, which was sort of a bit mean, but it sort
Hmm.
of collaborated with them in the process of this is a collective enterprise. So plants growing in gallery spaces, gathering seeds. So one of the works that I did, I had to gather whichever gum tree I could see from the front door of the gallery entrance. So I'd go to the gallery entrance, look around, closest gum tree that I could spot, and almost anywhere there's a gum tree, even if it's miles away and you just see the top of it, there's gum trees close enough almost everywhere. So I'd go to the front of the gallery, look for the closest gum tree, grab the gum nuts, germinate them and grow them in the gallery space. So then there was a connection between the outside and the inside.
Mm.
So that's sort of the underlying principle of the installations that I was working on at the time.
Yeah, great. I love that. The idea of relationships definitely seems like a wonderful idea, and even philosophy that you've managed to translate into all aspects of your career, I think, from what I can gather. So yeah, a great way to a great lens to view the world through, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. And it's sort of, yeah, just it enables you to focus on a different element. Like objects and the things that you see and touch are so much more obvious to us. They're like right there. But it's the relationships, we all really know it as social creatures. It's our friendships, our family, those things that define us and nurture us. So it seemed like a logical kind of material to work with. And of course, then that naturally progressed to curating. If you're working with a group, let's get a group of people together and let's coordinate, and then let's take that out of a gallery and put it into a community, a town, and let's coordinate those relationships. So that, yeah, sort of a natural inclination to take that philosophical approach and apply it to different areas.
Mm, mm. I really liked, kind of when you're talking about working at the town hall gallery, you were touching on something earlier about, making art accessible and people wandering in who would
Mm.
never really have much to do with art, and then all of a sudden being like, oh, wow, this is a whole new experience that I'm not really used
Mm.
to. Yeah, I was wondering if you had any kind of thoughts about, yeah, make the accessibility of art. Like, I often I'm often very jealous of music because music is like it's an art form, of
Mm.
course, using audio as a
Mm.
medium instead of visual mediums, but it
Mm.
has an instantaneous ability to create an emotional response with almost everyone on earth. Like whether it's hip hop, heavy metal, beautiful classical
Mm.
music or ambient music, whatever. I mean, it's all music, and almost everyone has their own taste and attraction to certain genres of music. Whereas I feel like art does not have the instantaneous reach or resonance with people. Obviously, people who are interested in art do, but yeah, I think it's just a byproduct of probably it being a visual medium or whatever. But I do also think it's a byproduct of some of the culture that is kind of surrounded in art, maybe conceptual art, maybe academically minded art and things, where there has almost become a little bit of a gap that I think it is in need of bridging, where yeah, a lot of people who art isn't their life. You know, if you ask what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of contemporary art, you know, it might be like you're saying, a confusion or something that needs to be decoded. I mean, yeah, do you have any thoughts on that kind of conundrum in the art world, being from someone who is making art accessible?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like generally in the way we are consuming entertainment or information is very, dominated by particular structures and systems, whether it's technology, television, broadcasting, capital that dominates those channels. And artwork has a difficult place in that structure. So I can see why it's not easy for art to be exposed to a general populace. So I feel like there's a lot, like myself, I take myself as an example. I didn't know that I could access art, and art wasn't presented to me. It wasn't taught at my schools that I went to. So there's kind of, but I can turn the telly on and watch 47 channels or 1,000 channels. I can flick over an Instagram and look at, millions of things, although Instagram has had an influence on the consumption of art because
Definitely.
it has enabled, that is one channel in which artwork can plonk. It can't plonk into television very easily. Name a good art TV show. There's so few of them, which is also, I think, a consequence of them trying to fit the format of television instead of trying to find an appropriate expression of artwork, but use the medium of television.
Right.
So anyway, I feel like a lot of people are not exposed to art. And I feel like there's a benefit for many of them if they are exposed to art. I think it can serve a lot of advantages for them in a lot of different ways. Health, conceptually, intellectually, in terms of just sort of engaging with other people, social interaction, a whole variety of reasons why they should. But I'm also aware too, having come through a PhD and curated a university gallery, some art is not and does not need to be, nor should be, widely accessible. There's some art that is really for a very niche audience of perhaps incredibly engaged art professionals. And there's a space for that. But that's not necessarily going to be an artwork that the general public is interested in. And that's completely fine. And I think that there's a space for those artworks or that type of art because that engages practitioners in a different way, or arts engaged audiences that tickles various aspects of their needs. But there is still some of that artwork and a whole swathe of other artwork that is accessible and is sometimes either limited in accessibility through the way it's presented or the way it's talked about. I didn't know I could walk into a commercial gallery until I was in second year university, 32 years of age. I went and knocked on Albert Street. There was a whole bunch of galleries. I knocked and the person was like, yeah. I'm like, may I come in? And they're like, yeah. But
Is this for
still
me?
rude to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was still really rude to me when I went in. But I didn't know. So, the general public don't know that they can walk into galleries, or they see, for the most part, art is this huge, like international extravaganza of geniuses. So they feel so far removed from it. But in the same way that, like, footy, the AFL, there's the AFL, and people who kick a footy around are never going to play AFL. But there's tons of clubs, there's tons of kick to kick. You can just kind of, the art world is it's sort of almost just that and not much else. We're not on television. It's not something people tend to do as a sort of recreational activity much, although I'm noticing a little bit of that. So anyway, yeah, so part of my, intention is to try and find ways to expose people to art as much as possible, because I just feel like there's a benefit for them for exposure to those things. And, you know, I hate the idea of hierarchies or levels, but, you know, there's really complicated academic art. It's intellectually complex, you know, and there's an audience for that, but that's not society. But there's a whole bunch of other art that is, could be like very easily consumed, very easily understandable, and very impactful, that's not getting reach. But I also do think there's some of the really complicated art, we risk sort of writing everybody off that they can't get it because it's too complicated, they don't understand. There's some aspects of really complicated art that's really magical. You don't have to be very bright to understand. And there's definitely, having, again, done the PhD thing and gone through the university system, there's definitely an overdressing and an overcomplication of a lot of artwork. You know, an artwork, it's a cliche, but if an artwork requires an essay for you to get a handle on it, I don't think that's a very good artwork. It's a good essay and artwork, but it's not a good artwork. So I think that there's artwork that, you know, overcomplicates itself unnecessarily. That's part of my desire too, to break that impression of things that are highly codified and highly intellectual. And a reasonable amount of time, it's not really necessarily highly intellectually or highly complex. Or if it is, it's actually not that hard to understand. So yes, I'm interested in trying to figure out how to reconfigure that. And the other aspect to that is not just exposure to the audience. I'm really interested in, maybe this comes from my economic background, how do I assist in growing the industry? Like, the more I talk about sort of exposing artwork to people so that they get, you know, they either come away with a new thought or a new feeling or a moment of, it's terrific. But I'm also equally interested in making sure that that artist now has an extra audience member and there's more awareness of their artwork. So in that regard about relationships, something doesn't exist unless someone's thinking about it. The more I can help artists show their work off so that more people are thinking about their work, then the more value there is in their work and the more it lives on out into the world. So I'm just as interested in trying to find ways to communicate about art so that it reaches an audience for the audience, but also so that it grows the capacity and strength of the industry itself and the participants of that industry, and even changing the structures of those industries where I can, and, you know, tweak around to start to change the industry at some level. You know, it's a huge industry and I'm just one person, but they're the sort of, you know, the intentions you have when you try and drive your work.
Right. Yeah, we need more people in the art world like you, Kent.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I find, and I say this as an art maker, an art lover, you know, so many of my friends are artists, and I love going to exhibitions and, you know, viewing all sorts of different artwork. Artwork that is very much not like the stuff that I make. I do enjoy engaging with it and thinking. But, you know, I think there is also a part of me that over the years, I do find some of the maybe the more overcomplicated or highly conceptual, maybe anti-aesthetic kind of artwork that I feel gets very, very much celebrated. A bit frustrating for the reasons that I think we've said. I think it does. And again, I'm not saying people shouldn't make that kind of a work, and I'm also glad that people do make challenging work do actually still get a platform. Like I really do. However, I do find, like, I don't know, just for example, lately I've just found so many winners of art prizes and stuff are just like, I end up just giving such an eye roll, to be honest, with some of them. And I won't name any art prizes or artists. So look, on one hand, I'm very glad that all sorts of art does get a platform and a fair go. But on another hand, I feel that sometimes it not only isolates audience and makes art accessible, but I also do find that it kind of discourages a lot of very talented artists that I know. I feel like there's so many incredible artists in Melbourne alone, like incredible artists that don't really get a fair go. That might be somewhere in between commercially viable and conceptually heavy. You know, a lot of people with a lot of great skills. Seems like there is a trend that's almost skills not good enough, anti-skill. We don't really like skill. We like throwing things in the face of skill. And that's at least my kind of thoughts. And yeah, I do find getting a little bit let down by the art world sometimes in that. But again, I'm conflicted because all sorts of art do need a fair go. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on kind of the relationship between you know, commercial art, academic art, institutional art, and even yeah, the institutions and artists? Like what is the balance and how is that reflected?
Yeah, I think I sort of agree and share your perception. And ironically, I think most people share that perception, but
Right.
from an industrial infrastructural point of view, there are so many inherent biases in the art world that discourage the uptake of those artists you're talking about, which I think is actually a travesty. I don't think that's like, I think that's a travesty of economics as much as it is a travesty of art. It's like it's easy to say, well, the economy is structured that way, so that's the way it is. Well, we're in charge of structuring it. And so I think like, yeah, so there's a desire and an impetus because of the academicization of art. It has a major influence. Most of the practicing, no, a significant portion of high quality practicing artists are in the academy. They have to balance their art practice with their teaching. Naturally, their brains are going to be absorbed with journals, expectations for research. Research is really driving a lot of art that comes out of the universities. So that naturally is going to have an influence on the work that comes out. The people that are around and have the resources of that structure are either shops, like a gallery is a shop, they're either buying wholesale and selling retail. So they're capitalists, and that's, you know, that's perfectly fine. Shops are great. But that's what they are. So there's a bias in what their desires are. And there's other gallery structures that have the almost willful aggressive break from that. Like, we are going to show things that are definitely not commercial. And there's a space for that too. But sometimes there's a fetishization of that non-commercial art and a desire to show that the idea is so much more important than the material, that we're going to make materials so shit. And I'm not even going to try or use any skill set. And there's absolutely a place for that. Like, you know, one of my favorite artists is Hans Huck. Pour a pile of dirt on the top of a roof and just let the seeds land on it and grow. Genius. But I would argue there's also a lot of material strengths to that work. But, you know, there's a long history of an important crucible, but perhaps over-influenced art power of galleries where you get a straw and a piece of blue tack and you stick it to the ceiling and then write an essay about new materialism. And, you know, at one level for an academic, that's like, oh, that's fascinating. Cool. I like that. That reminds me of this article by Bruno Latour. That's cool for that small audience. But I think it's over fetishizing that aspect. And not that they're wanting a broader audience, but it'll never reach a broader audience. And there doesn't have to be necessarily, you know, some galleries that do that is perfectly fine. Where there's an imbalance is where that artwork starts to dominate. The intellectual kind of stamp of approval is allocated to certain people because of the dominance of a particular clique or group of people that have an interest in that field. So there's definitely different aspects to that. And like, you know, there's commercial galleries, some are amazing, some are terrible, but these are all different systems within the structure of art that we kind of put in this amalgamous blurb, but they are actually quite different. There's the commercial sector, there's the university sector, there's commissions, art prizes. I hate art prizes with a passion, but the reason for that is that art prizes are not for artists, they're for galleries. And artists give their artwork to pretty much for free. In fact, not for free, they pay to promote the gallery, to encourage kind of a visitation. They're giving it all up. Artists are so generous, give it all up. And artists are exploited in 95% of art prizes. And the winners of art prizes are almost never based on the quality of the artwork. That's not the reason. And that's also a misconception. We think we're going to an art prize, what's the best painting?
Right.
That is not what they're choosing. I've sat on selection panels for those. They're not choosing the best artwork. They're choosing the best artwork for the gallery. Does it need to be acquired? What message does it send about the gallery? How much visitation is it going to drive? Is it going to fill a gap in the collection? Do I want to establish a relationship with this artist? There's all of those factors which sit separate from the, what is the artwork like in a room of other artworks with human beings wanting to sort of talk about the one that has the most resonance for the most people. And it pits artists against each other. And there's like 50, you say there's 50 artists and one winner who wins 50 grand or 100 grand, 49 other artists who come last, not second, last. And I just think it's a terrible model. And that all that money, if I had access to resources again, that money, you commission artists. You either have them apply and explain ideas, or you do your best with a group of people to pick out the people that are making interesting work, give them money to make work, pay them. And then maybe they can sell their artwork and get money on top of that at the end. That engagement with the labor force, that connection and that relationship with the labor force of productivity and consumption, rather than pitting them all against each other, far better model to my mind. But yeah, look, I've been in them as an artist. And, as an artist, especially a younger artist or a new artist, you're like, oh my God, I'm in a prize. Put it on the CV. And it does have some residual benefits for those things, but conceptually as an enterprise, and Australia has the highest number of prizes per capita, which is a consequence, I think, of the smaller market we have here. We don't have a buying market, so the industry is sort of self-correcting by putting all these prizes up. But then, that's the system limping its way forward instead of somebody restructuring the system better so that the resources are better allocated and the sharing of information is better coordinated. But yes, I could talk about art prizes for a while. I find them very frustrating.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I find them incredibly frustrating too. I mean, I don't really enter them anymore, which I think is also, it doesn't benefit me not to be a part of them because it does keep you relevant. But I just can't, very often in the best case scenario, you get into one and very often they're regional or interstate, and then you spend, $250 to $400 for a courier. You get in, that's a good outcome. And then you're, sometimes it can even be up to like $400 to $800 down because you were successful in getting in, and you don't win. But yeah, I think it's a really annoying model. There's also I feel like there's so much other frustrating elements about it. Like, I remember I was at a drawing prize and there was a work in there that was just it was a painting. It was not a drawing at all. And this is why do we have a drawing prize? And I know there can be different interpretations of drawing or mark making, but no, this was a painting. No shade to the artist or anything, but it's more about the structure of like, what's the point? And as a landscape painter, there's many landscape prizes that much of the work is not landscape. It's just
that's when you
can justify it with a nice artist statement or an essay and say how this is inspired by a landscape. But you could also write maybe an essay of talking about abstract expressionism or something just as easily with the same artwork.
Totally. And they're those situations where there's one that was recent that I had a lot of discussions with some artists about, and that's where it goes to, well, is this artwork about the art? Is about the art? Is it about drawing or landscape? Or is it about the gallery? So there's one that was recent to me in proximity to me. It was the same thing. Like, it's not, I can see, drawing's everything. That's a drawing. Everything's drawing. Making a line in space or a mark anywhere, it's drawing. I get it. But if you're using paints, it's sort of stretching into, well, there is painting, that's a category for that. But again, I'm not for categories either. But nonetheless, my point is, I bet the artwork that I'm thinking of, and maybe you, it wasn't about the prize at all. It was about the gallery. So the gallery is communicating, oh, we're a forward-thinking gallery. We can touch with the intellectual set. See, drawing can be anything. See, look, check it out. So that gives them some cachet. I bet you it was an artist that ticked probably a box that would help them get sort of a broader virtue signaling impression about what sort of engagement they're having, and maybe an artist that they're kind of hoping might come into their collection at some point. And that would be the primary reason that work has elevated itself into the shortlist, and not necessarily because it met the standard criteria of what the prize is claiming to do.
Right. Yeah. And I think one of my frustrations that it all does come down to, that I think, is that I just would love to see art as a vehicle to inspire people, include people, get people excited about creativity, excited about making art, excited about viewing art. And I feel like a lot of these very clever decisions that end up going into many different realms of the art world do often discourage. It definitely inspires some certain minded people, and again, I don't want to rag on it too much, because, like I said earlier, I am very glad that there are homes for all sorts of different thinking. I think it's just the maybe the balance of I don't know, how do we get people really into art? Because art's amazing. I love art, I really do. Like, it's my world, it's my life. So I think that's where the frustrations mostly come from, is things that tend to discourage rather than inspire, because the world's amazing, art is amazing, there's so much that should inspire, and I feel like often maybe the art world misses the mark there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that in allowing people to celebrate other people's creativity, it's so, I don't know, especially, it seems especially so at the moment. We've got global warming's kicking in, and there's storms and disasters around the world. There's wars kicking off. I mean, there's always wars and there's always dramas. We see them more because we're exposed to them more through technology, but there's definitely a sense that there's this kind of inertia of kind of shitty shit happening at the moment. And there's absolutely a place for us to pause for a moment and look at each other and look at what we can do as people and celebrate the amazing things human beings can do. And artwork is a beautiful way into that. And we also forget, I think, the local connection. So we're so internationally exposed. So even when I'm talking about global warming, that's obviously happening right here. But, my first thoughts are, storm in the US, and there's a flood, I think, or a mudslide, I think, in Nepal. It's an international kind of engagement with the world. This oppressive horribleness seems to be kind of reverberating and pouring into us through our phones as well. And the countenance to that for me is like the local connection, who's from my community, who absorbs these things but makes interesting stuff, music, sounds, combinations of colors that cause vibrations that make my heart skip or confuse my eyes, and my brain is lagging, and then, oh, that's a weird feeling. I saw it with my eyes before my brain clocked it. Those little things from the community around us would be so valuable and bring us out of our, massive global shit show and poured digital channel, and sort of just for a moment to the local around us. And, I think there's so much value in that. And I've been very interested in trying to find ways to do that. So yeah, I guess, curating was one of the aspects, and my desire to kind of, engage. And I think, all artists will always say there should be more people looking at my work. Spent a lot of time on it. It's definitely interesting. And there's a sort of a community cultural hesitation, and there's industry hesitations. With the art prize, I'm frustrated that the art industry works against itself. That's so frustrating to me, that there's from a kind of systems analytical point of view, I look at the structure of the industry, and I'm like, there's a handbrake here, or there's all these people that are congealed here, or there's this person sitting in this job for 16 years. That is not a healthy arrangement of people working together. So it frustrates me as much as it frustrates me that I wish more people were exposed to art through whatever method. It equally frustrates me, maybe even more so, that the art world inhibits its own capacity to do that. So yes, it's a kind of an endless discussion amongst artists and practitioners.
Yeah, I feel like it. I feel like it is somewhat of a kind of cultural issue, and I think in Australia there is definitely that kind of universally understood tall poppy syndrome, but you know, the first philosophy that you were kind of started with, where you're saying that the rising tide lifts all
Mm.
boats, I think is so much more of what we need in well, in every aspect of life, but you know, in the
Mm.
art world as well, because yeah, we should be picking each other up and not competing, and maybe yeah, the systems that are in place does make everything one big competition, and you
Mm.
know, we should be more you know, celebratory of each other's wins rather than competitive and left out. And you know, maybe I'm guilty of that too, but you know, like,
Look, it's a
but hey,
natural human inclination. That's why we've, you know, the West is coordinated into this competitive structure. There's huge
mm,
advantages out of it, but there's also, you know, huge consequences that need to be corrected. You know, capitalism doesn't work without the government putting on handrails to guardrails to make sure it doesn't get out of control. Competitiveness is great, but it needs guardrails. But then also,
mm,
you know, this fetishization of competition um, limits us from the small moments of joy, which is why I love art so much. You know, there's these massive complex things going on in the world, but the way someone decides to put blue next to red to make my eyes wiggle, that little thing, that a human being has just arranged two things and it's had a like a physiological impact on another human being. Like, I think that's majestic. And I think we so often lose in our competitive nature what's the differences, how do we get advantage, and we lose, you know, what's the similarities between us. You can see it in politics, it's just drawn so, it's hyper competitive now, and everything's awesome and everything's shit and there's nothing in the
mm,
middle, and we forget that there's all this other stuff that connects us that we all do that's beautiful. Like human, I often think of humans, you know, as we are naked apes. We are apes. We are
mm,
literally apes. Figured out how to put clothes on ourselves. We've got rocks and melted them and made metal and got sand and melted that into glass and silicon. And I can make a box out of that and talk to my friend in France. That is fucking genius. But we don't sort of take the time to kind of reflect on how beautiful that is. And that's why I think art's fantastic, because you can just have a moment of that. Like, it's wonderful that the phone, those technologies were invented. I didn't have a part in it. I can bask in the majesty of mankind working to create these things out of nature. Genius. Like, everything we've created out of nature, plucked it out of the ground, melted something, and invented something out of it. Genius. And the wonder of art is that you can do that in just tiny little moments. Like, here's a statue of Buddha looking at a CCTV camera image of himself from the camera. It's a tiny little thing, but it's like, oh, that's a cool little discussion about technology, spirituality. All an artist did was just have a clever idea, construct it interestingly, and offer you an opportunity to connect with it. And then we could have so many more magical kind of moments, like we go, oh, that's cool. And just a few of those through the day or the week would be sort of, you know, a medicine for us.
mm, definitely, definitely. Um, oh, I mean, there's so many things I could pick your brain about, really. But you know, your career has really kind of spanned across lots of different things of, you know, curating, organizing projects, collectives. You know, I think you've done a lot for bringing. You're living in Kyneton now, I believe, and I think yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
It seems like you've done a lot to promote community in regional spaces like Kyneton, Bendigo, working for the Trobe, and things like
Mm.
that. Yeah, I think it's incredible what you've been doing. But I was wondering, what are some like projects or shows or events or fairs or anything that you've been you know, very involved in or even initiated that you're probably the most proud of?
Well, there's not been much lately. So I've geared during the pandemic, and the university sector wasn't very well supported. I was made redundant of my curatorial role at La Trobe. So I've sort of backed
Mm,
out of the engagement with the industry at that level. So not much recently. And yeah, it's been focusing on teaching and a return to my own creative practice, which has been a real joy as well. But in terms of those sort of projects, by far the one that's I'm most proud of is the Kyneton Contemporary Art Triennial.
mhm,
And that came about, I remember distinctly, it came out of a conversation at a cafe in Kyneton. And there was two people had come, a mate had just built A Weiwei's bicycles at the NGV. Another mate had come back from Art Basel. Another mate had just got a solo show, I think, at Mildura. Kyneton, this little town, we're all in a cafe. Everyone's sort of rocking up. Oh, hey, how you going? And, you know, we're telling each other what we're doing. And it just dawned on me, like, we are all going off to do this stuff. We're going to the city. We're going out to all these other places. There's like 20 interesting creative people in this little town. Why don't we make something here with the skill set we've got, and also, you know, expose our community to art? Like, we, at one level, it felt like we'd all been economic refugees from the city. We'd all come out because it was too expensive to live in the city and maintain a studio. Hop out an hour out of town, you could get a back then, you know, a 3-bedroom house with a shed, turn the shed into a studio. So it felt like we were sort of these artistic outliers hovering in this little town and going off and doing our thing. It just really dawned on me that, like, we can create our own. Why are we, you know, always hopeful that a biennial might reach out to us and say, oh, I saw your work, would you like to be in a show? Or a commercial gallerist would come up to us at an event and go, I like your work, would you like to come and talk about a show? Hoping that it was going to come to us. And I just felt like, well, we've got all the skill sets. We get to set the agenda. We can create the infrastructure. Let's try and find something that we could do. So we coordinated together, maybe 8 or 9 of us. We set up a non-profit organization and then just went hunting for resources. And one of the joyous things for me about that, there's resources out there if you've got a good idea and a good purpose. So we got, I think, about $150,000 worth of grant money over that project time, because it was a good idea. And at the core of it was like an honoring of artwork. This is about the joy of artwork, people that make it, and sharing it with a community that could collectively engage with it. Out of the gallery space, so it breaks that, you know, me 32 years of age knocking on a commercial gallery door, am I allowed to come in? To being like someone who's going to do their shopping, but there's a performance going on in the car park of Woolies. It's like, let's try and, you know, figure out a way to do that. So that was the most joyous on so many levels, coordinating all the resources. I had like 30 different, you know, you pull $5,000 from here and $2,000 from here and 10 grand from here and $100 from here. Massive effort to coordinate all that, you know, 8 or 10 or 12 artists, and trying to find locations for them, and an old foundry that no one's ever been into at the top of an old doctor's surgery we had to clear all the files out of. All these complicated, very complicated. But for me, you know, oh God, there's so many relationships. How do I coordinate all these relationships? Also took, well, that's incredibly complex. My philosophy about the objects sort of takes the pressure off. I'm not worried about the objects or the things. I'm just worried about the relationships. That artist, that place, boom. It can sort itself out. It doesn't need me driving it, which is potentially a problem I see also with the industry. Get out of the way. Let the artists do the work. You know, curators can be to directorial, to controlling, to directive. I felt like the best way was to get the artists, give them the resources, give them the space, let them do it. Don't worry about it. They sort it out, and they rise to the occasion because they're being supported and they're being honored for, like, I see what you do, I trust you, do something. So much better. So I had a great time, mostly on so many levels, but coordinating a group of friends. It was a dozen of us at any one time, all working together, you know, having meetings, but trying to keep it fun. But our passion for, if you see what this artist has done, imagine if they worked with the old age citizens down by the river, you know, all this kind of coordination of being with my friends and sharing our passion and helping other people and trying to find artists that we knew would have a benefit for their career, would take them out of the industry. You know what? Come to Kyneton, drop out of the industry for a second, give you, I don't know, $5,000 and a venue, and in a year, give us something. That felt so joyous. So I got to work with my mates. I got to, you know, help pull artists out and give them a bit of resources to make stuff. There's no pressure about whether they need to sell it. They can do something completely different from their normal practice because it's out of the city. It's in a triennial. It's the flavor of experimentation. It's not in a gallery space. Loosened artists up, and some of the artwork was so beautiful, like emotionally moving, quite a lot of it. and the impact that it had on the town as well. There's a sort of sense of, it's a vibrant town. There's a lot going on. Have you seen the new art thing in town? It felt like from all aspects, all stakeholders or people that connected to that project, it served a benefit. And because it had that underlying philosophy of the artwork comes first, and I built that into the budget too. And I've done that everywhere I've worked. And it is surprisingly uncommon.
Mm.
And I love budgets coming from economics. Budgets are a machine that you can make things happen with. And I would love to work with artists on budgets, because I've also sat on grants, Arts Vic grant approvals and stuff, and budgets are always the worst. Artists that don't pay themselves, they don't know how to coordinate them. I've got a bachelor's degree, a first-class honours degree, and a PhD. And not once did they teach me about how to run a budget.
Right.
Anyway, in the budget, I think, as a rule, the highest proportion of costs should always be artists. If you look at any institutional budget, it is never artists. So when I went to La Trobe, that was the rule. So we have, structures for, you've got to pay for marketing, you've got to pay for cleaning, you've got to pay for signs and ads and, all that kind of stuff. 10 grand, 20 grand, 40 grand, whatever. It cannot be more the artists. So the artists have to have the highest proportion of the budget costs. I think that imbues the resources and the finances with intention, good intention. And I think that has a consequence. So I was proud of the way we were able to coordinate that as well, to ensure that artists are the key factor. I mean, I've been in galleries where the cleaner gets paid more than the artist whose work 1,000 people are looking at and going, oh, but the cleaner, which is a fundamentally important job, is getting paid more, but that cleaner wouldn't have a job if that gallery wasn't there. That gallery wouldn't be there if that artist wasn't there. And it makes no sense to me, any economic point of view, that the artists are not the major part of that calculation. So those things, and my ability to have an influence to change those at La Trobe. When I got to La Trobe University, they didn't pay artist fees. Outrageous. A university, $1 billion university. I've got a gallery open to the public on one of the main streets in Bendigo, inviting people in. I'm getting paid as a curator. I've got a team of people. The artist, not paid. That is appalling. I know we all talk about this endlessly. The easiest fix for that is to ensure that the artist's costs, fees, are the highest proportion of all the other costs you've got to pay in any institution. It's actually very simple. And then you coordinate how everything works around that. But if you set that intention, that means that everything works in service of that. And so far, the inevitable outcomes are much more positive than if it's not that way.
Incredible, Ken. I said it once, I'll say it again. We need more people like you in the art world making these kinds of changes. It's just, fantastic to hear, with the right intentions behind, from an institutional level coming down. So good stuff. Very, very good stuff. But I've often thought the same thing. You'll go to large museum shows or biennales or whatever. And, often artists will get paid a bit, maybe enough just to cover framing or something or whatever, depending on the kind of art they're making. But, you'll see all the tradies, all hands on deck, everyone, building the new install. I guarantee you every single one of those tradies is getting paid, and they're getting paid at the rate that they determine, not a museum rate that's whatever. And that did always kind of stick out to me, how the focus of many of these giant shows, art fairs, biennales, whatever. Even when the artist does get paid, it's still quite small. I don't want to sound like ungrateful or anything. Not like I've ever received it, but just in general for artists. And that has always stuck out to me. So it would be fantastic to see those kinds of changes or initiatives just at least be promoted, and then it eventually just gets to a point where institutions that aren't doing that it's kind of embarrassing. They're kind of something that they desperately need to keep quiet, not just as an industry standard. This is embarrassing.
I agree.
It
seems like a pretty straightforward principle, and having worked in institutions too, I can see why they would make particular arguments for it to be the way it is, the status quo. But I don't think that's good enough. And I think it's also, like I was saying, I think that's inhibiting the gallery. I think not paying the artists is slowing the gallery down. So they're actually it's actually a cost they're putting on themselves. And I think that's problematic. And, look, where I have found the ability to coordinate resources to pay us, it's still not enough.
Mm.
I've run a couple of triennials and festivals and stuff. And, there's been $800 or $1,000. It's more than the others pay, or more than the other institutions pay. Or, you pay, you hit the NAVA rate and you go above to demonstrate that you're pushing beyond the standard. And even that's very low. On a group show, an artist might get $500. Doesn't account for their materials, doesn't account for their labor. You'd want to hope that it's being transported for them. Another thing that doesn't necessarily universally happen either. The museums also have a capacity to support the artists around their other supporting costs, careers, framing, marketing. They have, I think, a responsibility. And honestly, too, the workload that I've seen in the gallery situation. So I've worked corporate, I've worked as an insurance clerk, a barista. I'm now a teacher. I've done lots of different jobs. Curators, I love curating and I love being a curator. Curators don't work anywhere near hard enough. There's so many of them not doing enough work, so many of them not putting in the supporting structural work that they could be doing to support the artists that they need to do their work. It drives me nuts. Artists are your materials first and foremost, and you've got to respect them. You've got to honor them. And so many curators sit at their desk. Some gallery spaces I know of where they sit upstairs, downstairs. They sit upstairs, email the tech staff about how to hang a painting in the gallery, and they won't come and look. How a curator cannot be in the space and feel the artwork and know where it needs to be in the room, that is not a curator. And there's a lot of not curators in the industry, which is infuriating to me.
Yeah. Interesting to hear. Just lastly, I'd also like to congratulate you on releasing your first album, or with your new project called Fletching. It's awesome. I really dig it. When did your musical? You said, at the start of the chat, that you were in a bands before art entered your life. Yeah. Tell us about this new musical project that you've just embarked on.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I'm loving it. So yes, in the 90s, I was in a band. I started, me and my mates were just, like all teenagers, enraptured by bands. And we just, my attitude, well, let's just create a band. Let's start a band. So we got a few of my mates together and we started playing. I was going to be the singer originally, because I can hold a note when someone else is singing and I can sing along with them. And I was a poet, a teenage poet, and I was, really good at English. So I'm a singer, a bit of riz. And I remember in the first rehearsal we were playing, and the guitarist turned to me and said, "Have you ever thought about the bass guitar?" Singing was not up to scratch, so I went out and bought a bass. Taught myself how to play bass. I went and got tab, which is a way of reading music that's not musical notation. It's just the position on the fretboard. I went and bought tab books for Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and Faith No More, The Real Thing. And then I played both of those albums on repeat for months and taught myself how to play. So that was really good. Flea and Billy Gould, great bass players. So I taught myself how to play bass, and then we rehearsed and we got gigs. And just as we were sort of starting, we had a demo we recorded and we started to get more gigs, the drummer quit. And the guitarist was just finishing off an accounting degree. And I just finished my commerce degree and was working at head office at Officeworks, I think. And so it was kind of a pivotal point. It's like, do we get another drummer and keep pushing, or, we're getting old now, do we need to just get on with our lives? So in some regretful way, the band finished up 98, I think. With this, and I always had this sense of like, we were just starting to finally, get good and produce, but that's fine. And I've just had an opportunity recently since changing careers. And I've always loved music. It was, I taught myself. It gives me the most immediate sort of passion, like response. And you were talking before about the magic of music, because it's abstract, it sort of crosses boundaries. And I make mostly electronic music too, so there's no obvious meaning to it. You just kind of allowing yourself to respond to the notes or the melodies or the rhythm. something really beautifully responsive about that, and that connection immediately, like someone's hearing something. It's physiological because it's sound waves hitting you. Something beautiful about it. But yeah, just recently I bought some equipment for making electronic music, native instruments, a Machine Mark III. And so when I played in a band, it was funk metal, but we started playing with drum machines. It was that transition where like the Prodigy just came in with Breathe, and there was this rock electronic sort of amalgamation that started to happen. So I was really curious about how those two things integrated, but I never got much of a chance to push the electronic music much. So I bought some equipment, started making music. The way this machine, this instrumental machine, sequencer, drum machine, it's very sort of holistic, but it's structured, as many of your listeners might know, there's sort of grid pads. Ableton's a similar thing. That just clicked for me. So I taught myself how to play bass with tab, and I could get it, and then I could figure out scales, and then I was free. Once I knew how to play, I could make my own music, and we made all originals, and very proud of the stuff we made back then. But this particular equipment with the grids just suits the way my brain works. And I started playing with it. Oh my God, this has opened music to me. I'm not limited by scale or keyboards or strings. It's this structural pattern of grids that is also completely organic. It doesn't have to be locked. So anyway, that completely opened me up, and I just, like, music just flooded out of me. And I think also because I'm in a transitional part of my life where I've kind of transitioned from one career to another. Recently become, well, not recently, but being single and kind of a different outlook on life. I think that came at the right time. It enabled me to process that stuff through sound. And it's almost the same to me as art. I'm looking for vibrational intensities, that relationships that work together. And the wonderful thing about the sort of music the way I make the music is I construct these beats and then the melodies, and then I create another melody, and I'm just looking for them to weave together, and I'm looking for the right composition, the right relationships, and I can build up these layers. And yeah, it's just a really terrific creative expression. And I've done that same thing, same philosophical approach. I can either wait around for someone to go, hey, your music's cool, do you want to go on a record label? It's never going to happen. And I don't play live, so I'm going to have to kind of get into the mindset of how does the system work? What's the structures for delivering this artwork to an audience? So I'm just trying to figure out, I'm not just going to make music now, I'm going to create an EP, I'm going to release it on Spotify and go through the process of trying to reach an audience, give it the honor and sort of respect that I want it to have in the making of it and the sharing of it. So I'm doing my best to make that transition, and give it as much chance as possible to kind of be shared with the world. Because first and foremost, it's for me. I put it on. I'm constantly mixing, and then I'll put it on in the car and drive to work and listen to it. And I just love listening to my own music in the car and back. So at the very least, it's bringing me a great sort of joy and sense of pride that I've made this thing and I enjoy it. And if there's a possibility to share it with other people and they hear it and go, yeah, cool, I like that. I feel uplifted by that tune, then a huge advantage. It's same sort of principle underlying it.
Fantastic. Yeah. I'm always blown away by like tool makers or makers of instruments, and you're talking about the grid system of the drum machine actually finally clicking in. And for people who aren't watching this, the artwork that is that you have made that's in the background is a series of grids, and just a perfect like comparison to how your brain works. But yeah, I mean, even just like all sorts of tools, the things that allow us to play, like even software programs, and yeah, it's cool. It's cool to hear you talk about finding that. I definitely always want to when I finally get fully burnt out from the art world, I fully intend to immerse myself in music, and probably won't sound very good at the start, but you just gotta, I don't know, I feel like there's something beautiful. I used to play music, but yeah, beautiful about making music and putting it out there. And yeah, it's I'm excited to jump into that one day. I don't know when, but hopefully soon. So yeah, excited to hear you talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been on the back burner for a long time, and there's been moments where I've got like Pro Tools and created a couple of tunes on my laptop. I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. It's always bubbling away, but yeah, when and if the moment comes, that will also bring it out of you. If it's something you're interested in, like with all things, if you have an interest for it and it it triggers something in you. It generates some growth or response, or even just, like a vibrationary tingle. It's a key that it's interesting. And if you have a passion and interest in it, you will find a way. And as a creative person, you won't be able to help yourself. You'll press two buttons, it'll be beep, boop. You're like, oh, that's cool. Beep, boop.
Mm.
Oh, what about if I repeat that? Beep, boop, beep, boop. All right, here we go. Your natural interest in what's going on will create what you want to create.
Yeah. Do you find that having another side project as well kind of, I don't know, scratches the itch to make everything else more doable? Like I sometimes feel like, having, well, you said you've always worked with multiple things on the go, but
Mm.
I often feel like when all eggs are in one basket, it's almost essential to have some kind of creative outlet that is not career oriented or not so serious. Have you found that that's kind of just stimulated other aspects of your life?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's
Mm,
quite often I find that my most intense creative moments are as a consequence of doing something completely not creative. So for a little while, I was working in a furniture factory, and that can be creative, but my role wasn't. I was sanding and kind of preparing, cutting timbers. Um, and I'd do that all day and then come home. And because I hadn't attended to my creative brain and just been absorbing the world and doing my thing, when it came to sort of moments of grabbing a tool, whether it's a paintbrush or a machine, um, the creativity was sort of ready to go. Whereas I feel like if I'm doing one thing all the time, I almost expend the fuel of it.
mm,
And also, I get bored of things very quickly. I have ADHD. And so I kind of need constant stimulation. So I found for me that if I could construct my day the way I really would want to, it would be in little blocks. 2 hours I make music, then I'd have half an hour cup of tea, then I'd do some painting, then I'd go for a walk for an hour, then I'd do another 2 hours, and it would be two or three different things. And it sort of just helps. It also helps exercise the different parts of my brain. It's not just the one muscle kind of constantly going on a visual interpretation of colors. I've got this one going with spatial sound, and then my physiological being out in nature, looking at trees and looking at the shapes of leaves. It's important for me to have those stimulations. Um, and so yes, and then they all feed into each other. So it's not like I've taken one and I've cut it off and I've gone over to this one. They're kind of absorb into the colors of the leaves. On my walk up at Black Hill, again, I influence the color of the painting that I do, or the bird call that I heard on my walk, that repetitive currawong sound. Oh,
mm.
that might make a nice melody if I converted that to strings, maybe. So all of them start to feed into each other, and they're actually helpful that way. And yeah, I just kind of get bored if I'm on the one thing for too long, and I kind of run out of that fuel. So I sort of hopping around keeps the energy up and fuels each other. So on one hand, I feel like I'm doing 25% of music on a day, each day, rather than one day of 100% music. It's actually better for me to span it over four than to do it all in one hit.
Mm, yeah, fantastic. Well, it's definitely been incredibly creatively stimulating talking with you, Kent. Yeah, just make me
Thanks,
want
Tommy.
to, I don't know, play, explore, have fun creatively.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed talking with you. And yeah, I think the opportunities that you have created over the span of a great career are much appreciated by many artists and creatives in
Thanks,
the
Tommy.
art world. So yeah, thank you for your time and thanks for what you do.
Thank you. And thanks for your interest in it. And thanks for letting me sort of articulate it and talk about it. You do this stuff, and it's nice to kind of pause and go, why am I doing that? Or what are the things that are of most interest to me when I actually start talking about it? So that's been really wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. Have a wonderful day. See ya.